Pokémon has mastered the art of world building. Over the last 30 years, each generation has added new regions, with a total of 9. Each region adds more lore and context to existing mysteries in the world, while also building entirely new ones. But what if these 9 regions weren't all of them? Across the lifespan of the franchise, Pokémon has created entire regions outside of the main 9, and most players have no idea they exist. Many of them have been slowly lost to time over the years. These are the regions that Pokémon forgot. First of all, let's talk about the regions from the anime. There's actually 2 different places shown, and to start with, we have the Orange Archipelago, which are more commonly known as the Orange Islands. These islands exist just south of Kanto, but function as a completely separate region with their own rules. They have their own league system known as the Orange League, where there's 4 badges to obtain throughout the Orange Islands, before being able to compete in the championship on Pomelo Island. These badges aren't given in the usual ways though, and instead are earned through various trials set up by the Orange Crew, this region's version of gym leaders. The other main point about Orange Islands is that they have their own regional Pokémon, with the most famous examples being the Crystal Onyx or the Pink Pokémon. If you're observant, you might realise that both of these main features of the Orange Islands just so happen to be the same features in the Alola region, and they even have the exact same climate. Like, surely this isn't a coincidence. A lot of you probably know about the Orange Islands, but the second region in the anime is a lot less known, and for very good reason. The Decolore Islands are a group of islands between Unova and Kanto. So what's on these islands, you might ask? Regional forms? Nope. A new gimmick entirely? Not quite. Are there at least some gyms in the league? No, there's not. The Decolore Islands don't have any sort of structure like that, and basically exist within the anime as some fun side quests for Ash and the gang to do before heading to the next region. While no one really remembers the Decolore Islands, I do. More accurately, I remember a specific episode. As a kid, I watched every episode of the black and white anime. I knew every Pokemon off by heart. So the absolute excitement I got when I saw this guy come across my screen, I can't explain it. This is one of the first reveals of a Kalos Pokemon, and the rest of the Decolore Islands was a segue into Ash's journey to Kalos. The Decolore Islands and Orange Islands both exist mainly to further along Ash's story in the anime, and while they're fun additions with their own flavour and lore, they don't compare to these islands. Welcome to the Sevii Islands. The Sevii Islands are a chain of 7 islands to the south of Kanto, and can be seen as the in-game counterpart to the Orange Islands. That's about where the similarity ends though. These islands have their own economy and markets separate from Kanto, with remnants of isolated Team Rocket members taking over and running a warehouse on 5 Island. If you talk to the islanders, an elderly woman will explain about the beliefs of the people of the Sevii Islands. They claim their lands are called the Sevii Islands not because there are 7 of them, but because they were formed in 7 days, which could be seen as a potential reference to Christianity's belief of the world being created in 7 days. It's a good thing that Sevii isn't referring to the amount of islands, because there actually isn't 7, there's 9. 2 extra small islands exist within the Sevii Islands, Naval Rock and Birth Island. These 2 islands are home to Lugia and Ho-Oh and Deoxys respectively. Little to no civilization can be seen on these islands, but they still belong to the Sevii Archipelago. When the player visits here and progresses through the story, they eventually find and beat the Team Rocket Grunts. After raiding and defeating the Grunts, they realise that the rumours of a kid strong enough to beat their leader are true, that Team Rocket are no more, and they disperse. Apart from one Grunt, who vows to find Giovanni and rebuild Team Rocket. A popular fan theory is that this Grunt moves up through the ranks and becomes Team Rocket Executive Petrel, who 3 years later is leading the hunt for Giovanni. While the Sevii Islands seem to be fairly undeveloped compared to the bright, big cities of the Kanto region, they're home to one piece of interesting technology, the Network Machine. The Network Machine requires various items, which the lead developer of the machine, Celio, has you collect. As you help build its machine, links to different regions are established, first to Kanto and then to Hoenn, allowing communication and trade between the regions. For the player, it acts as the in-game link to trade their Pokemon between different games set in these regions, as well as connecting to an extra hidden region that I'll talk more about later. With all the regions I've covered so far, despite their differences, they've held something in common, the existence of Pokemon trainers. Most people think that catching and battling are commonplace in the Pokemon universe, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Let me introduce you to the next Pokemon region, Fiore. In the Fiore region, Pokemon are treated very differently. Instead of the usual Pokemon fights you might expect, the region is governed by an organisation of Pokemon Rangers. These Rangers use the help of the existing Pokemon throughout the region, but never keep them permanently. This is done by using a device called a capture styler, where the Pokemon are circled in energy, which seems to calm it and lets the user gain its trust. The Fiore region can be played in the Pokémon Ranger series, where the player is assigned the role of a ranger adventuring through the region, dealing with environmental threats and helping people. Eventually the player comes face to face with the Go Rock Squad, a criminal syndicate which aims to destroy the Pokémon Rangers and replace them as the main organisation of the region, which they would then use their power to enslave the Pokémon. The Fiore region holds a secret, however, and that is very likely a native home for Manaphy. During a post-game quest, the Rangers find a strange egg on the beach. If you watched my previous video, you know this egg leads to one of the most notorious shiny hunts in Pokémon history. But aside from the shiny, this cutscene reveals something pretty interesting. We tend to tie Pokémon to their debut generation, such as Manaphy being seen as a Sinnoh Pokémon, yet this egg originates in Fiore, proving that some Pokémon might not actually be native to the debut region. But the Pokémon Ranger games aren't actually just based on one region, but three, and the second is Almia. Almia is the setting of Pokémon Ranger Shadows of Almia. It acts as the base for the Ranger Union, and is a place of great importance for all Pokémon Rangers. It has some of the most varied climates we see in the Pokémon universe, from the Haruba Desert to Higher Valley. While Almia itself is an ancient land, the Pokémon Rangers that we now know actually began with three individuals: Hastings, Irma, and Lamont. These three each had a core value that would build into the Ranger world Almia is known for today. Irma wanted to protect people and nature, Hastings wanted to create a device that could connect people and Pokemon, and Lamont wanted to build a school to educate the newcomers in their region. Hastings ended up developing the Styler, tool used by all Rangers. Irma formed the Ranger Union, and Lamont built the Ranger Academy. But long before the Ranger Union was created, before even Pokemon trainers existed at all, Almia was ruled by a king. Not much is known about this king, apart from the way he mistreated his children. The king got into an argument with his three sons and banished them. The eldest was sent to a volcano, the second to a desert island, while the youngest stayed in the castle. After a while, the king felt guilt from the way he mistreated his children and was consumed with anger, solitude and bitterness. This darkness took a tangible form as the Shadow Crystal, a massive crystal that turns people's negative feelings into power. The sons fought back against this crystal, with the youngest willing himself to shine with a light that could counteract the darkness. The three brothers eventually sealed the crystal in the Chroma ruins, where a Darkrai would eventually become its guardian. This ties into the story of Shadows of Almia. A corporation called Altru Inc. is running an oil operation. They're draining the land and polluting the Sea of Wailord, majorly harming the sea life and leaving the region scarred. As the oil eventually runs dry, the company's president goes digging for a new resource to capitalize on and finds fragments of the ancient Shadow Crystal. While the president doesn't let the shadows affect him, it instead affects his son Blake. Blake becomes obsessed with power and founds the villain team Dim Sun, abandoning his own father, using the crystal's energy to build machines that mind control Pokemon with the goal of taking over the region. As a Pokemon Ranger, the player is tasked to stop Blake and Team Dim Sun before they fully take control of the Shadow Crystal and use the darkness from it to take over all of Almia. While Almia had a dark history filled with conflict, the final region in the saga of Ranger games is a much more peaceful and quiet place, but with just as much backstory. This is Oblivia. Oblivia works a bit differently from the other games. Unlike the team of Rangers in Fiore or the Rangers Union in Almia, Oblivia is governed by a single Ranger named Rand. This isn't because Rand is some all-powerful Ranger that doesn't need the help of anyone else, he's actually quite ordinary. Oblivia is just so peaceful, there's basically no demand of any sort of Ranger presence within the region. While Oblivia doesn't have rampant criminal syndicates, what it does have is an excessive amount of religious buildings and places. Throughout the region, the player can find plenty of temples built to worship Pokemon, namely Arceus. These temples were built during Oblivia's ancient period, and the temples are fairly dilapidated by now. These temples were guarded by oracles who wore steel head armor which gave them power to control Pokemon. These temples include the Forest, Fire, Ice, Thunder, Dark, Light, and Odd temples. There are also monuments built to honour the legendary Pokemon Latios and Latias, and can be called upon to help Rangers when needed. The major conflict in Oblivia happened with the Oracles. Out of all the Oracles, there was one that was different, Elios. He wore the golden armor which let him control the other Oracles. Elios became obsessed and drunk with his power, and set his sights on controlling the god of all Pokemon, Arceus. But the golden armor wasn't enough alone to control something as powerful as Arceus. For that, Elios needed a special orb, an orb filled with the absorbed power of countless Pokemon. With both the armor and the orb, Elios succeeded in enslaving Arceus, and planned to reshape and rule the world with it. But one of his servants, Sabios, betrayed him and stole the orb for himself. With the orb, Sabios planned to build a gigantic fortress in the sky where he could rule from, where he'd be safe from retaliation. Sabios is eventually stopped, and his big evil plans of a sky fortress is thwarted, and it's actually done by you, the player. Throughout the story of Guardian Signs, the player is sent back in time periodically by Celebi, who needs the player's help to stop Sabios. The player works through the temples, and eventually manages to calm Arceus down to put a stop to his plans. The revelation is that Oblivia's calm and peaceful nature is actually due to the player travelling thousands of years in the past to save the region from a dictatorship. But it doesn't completely end there. A bunch of seemingly rookie thieves called the Pokemon Pinchers revealed to actually be the game's villains, a group called the Society. These that were hunting for the same golden armor that allowed Elios to control all oracles and Pokemon. I won't dive into the rest of the story of this game, and might actually just end up making a full video covering the entire story of this trilogy, if that's something you guys would be interested in. I think Fiore, Almia and Oblivia is some of the most fleshed out, lore heavy places that exist in all of Pokemon, with the regions having their own history of fallen monarchs or great betrayals. While these regions, with Oblivia in particular, are seen to be worshipping Arceus, the god of Pokemon, this next region isn't just connected to Arceus, it is Arceus. Pokemon Conquest is home to the Ransei region, and if you take a look on the map, it might remind you of something. The entire region is shaped like an Arceus, and the locals believe that Arceus itself created the entire region in its own image. Ransei is divided into 17 kingdoms, with each kingdom themed around one of the Pokemon types. A few examples are Aurora, based on the normal type, Ignis, based on the fire type, or Violite, based on the electric type. Each kingdom is ruled by a warlord, with the player starting in Aurora with the partner Eevee. A legend in Ransei states that whoever unifies all 17 kingdoms will summon the region's creator. This legend ended peace within the Ransei region, and is the cause of pretty much all conflict. Every warlord became hostile, wanting to defend their own kingdom from others trying to fulfill the legend, while also wanting to expand their empire to claim the legend for themselves. A strange phenomenon that exists only in the Ransei region is that the bond trainers share with their Pokemon is so strong that humans themselves will evolve alongside their Pokemon. But that's not the only mystery of the Ransei region. There is little indication as to where Ransei is, or how long ago the events of Pokemon Conquest and the legend to unite the kingdoms happened. Due to the medieval samurai style of the game, it's reasonable to assume that these events happened long before the modern Pokemon games. A fan theory about the region as a whole suggests that Ransei doesn't actually exist anymore, and was once the Pangea of the Pokemon world, a single supercontinent that later broke apart into the regions we know today. Due to its scale, housing 17 distinct kingdoms, all big enough to exist on their own, there's a lot of merit to the idea. This can be backed up either more Regigigas, who was said in Sinnoh lore to have towed entire continents into place using ropes, giving the theory a candidate for how that supercontinent could have been pulled apart. There isn't anything confirmed about Ransei, and honestly there isn't really a lot to know. While all the regions in the Ranger trilogy were given lore and world building before Nintendo forgot about them, it feels like a lot of questions of the Ransei region were just left completely unanswered. If you're enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm a very small channel, so each sub goes a long way, and it also lets me know that you like these sort of videos. While Ransei was forgotten due to all the mysteries and unanswered questions, this region is forgotten for a much darker reason. Welcome to the Orre region. Unlike all the other regions in this video, this region is a barren wasteland, bone dry and completely lifeless. And when I say lifeless, I mean it. Orre is home to almost no wild Pokemon at all, making it the only place seen in Pokemon history with conditions this bad. The citizens of Orre find a different way to get Pokemon, and that's through stealing, and that includes you, the player. In fact, the player is a member of the evil team, Team Snag'em, at the start of the story, whose mission is to steal Pokemon. Dissatisfied with Snag'em's exploits, the player ends up defecting from them, raiding a hideout and running away. In the Orre region, people steal others' Pokemon using a device called a Snag Machine. And when the player raids the Snag'em base and defects, they manage to take a portable Snag Machine with them, which sets up the entire story. The player, however, isn't just stealing Pokemon for the sake of it. They're stealing a very specific type of Pokemon, something Orre created that exists nowhere else, Shadow Pokemon. Shadow Pokemon is a type of Pokemon that only exists within the Orre region, and a Pokemon that have had their hearts artificially turned off so they can be used as fighting machines. An organisation called Cypher are responsible for this, and found a way to shut out a Pokemon feeling any emotions whatsoever. And this is where the trainer comes in to help this apocalyptic wasteland, and that's by using the Snag Machine on Shadow Pokemon. By stealing these Pokemon away from Cypher, the player can slowly reopen its heart through a process called purification, slowly undoing the damage and giving the Pokemon their emotions back. While Orre is well known to some, it's been forgotten by most. The dark atmosphere, the apocalyptic wasteland, the idea of stealing Pokemon, it just doesn't fit the kid-friendly and diluted formula Pokemon uses today. Orre is treated as a forgotten child of the Pokemon franchise. If you remember earlier when I mentioned the network machine had an extra mystery region you could communicate with, Orre was that region, but it's never acknowledged in the game itself. If you transfer a Pokemon caught in Orre to one of the mainline games, it won't say it comes from Orre, and instead from a distant land, a vague title the game uses when they aren't tracking a real specific location. So while Kanto, Johto, and every other region gets named and remembered, or doesn't get that. It's just reduced to these 3 words. And in a way, that's true with every region we've talked about today. The Anime Islands, the Ranger regions, Ransei and Orre, they're real places with real histories that the franchise has just slowly forgotten about over the years. While we may never get to visit these places again, as long as the media still exists showing proof of these regions, and these games exist online, the regions won't ever truly be forgotten.